We still have a few folks joining, so we'll try to get as many people on board as possible. Okay. Hi, everybody. I see lots of good friends and hopefully some future friends. I am Kathleen Kelly, this year's mayor for the city. We rotate that position on an annual basis. And it's been quite a pleasure to lead these town halls by Zoom. I think it has allowed some folks to participate who otherwise might not be able to. So thank you. This town hall is featuring South Palm Desert issues, but time permitting, we'll take questions of any nature whatsoever. And our topics concern much more than just South Palm Desert. All three topics are of interest much more broadly. We will build up to an update from Alan Monroe, the Living Desert CEO, about exciting happenings there, which of course is not just of interest to the whole city, but to the whole world. So thank you for making time for this, Alan. Our first topic this afternoon is undergrounding utilities. One of the questions that has come into the city in advance of today's session is Palm Desert is so good at getting so many things accomplished. Why haven't you gotten all utility lines put underground by now? Because there are some cities who have accomplished that. Those of you who are showing your faces, raise your hand if you lived in Palm Desert in 1976. I knew Sandy would. Anybody else? So Sandy has some perspective about why things are not underground. It has to do with a priority that took center stage in 1976, compliments of a tropical storm, Kathleen. No relationship, it just happened to be named Tropical Storm Kathleen. But I'm going to share my screen to show you exactly what Tropical Storm Kathleen did, particularly in South Palm Desert. This house is on Alamo, quite close to Haystack. And it's not a terrific picture, but you can see that mud is halfway up the house. And sadly, that degree of damage happened throughout much of Palm Desert, particularly South Palm Desert, because of inadequate flood control. So the short story is this: one of the primary sources of funds that cities have used to accomplish undergrounding, which is a huge expense, has been redevelopment money. The redevelopment system, when it existed, allowed cities to sell bonds and to pay those bonds off when the investment increased property values with the incremental increase. Palm Desert opted to use redevelopment to accomplish flood control. And you can see why that was such a critical priority. The consequence of doing that tremendous flood control work is more recently, when we've had big storms, like February 14th, a couple of years ago, the news is full of cars stalled in Palm Springs intersections, in La Quinta intersections, but you don't see any good news footage from Palm Desert because the flood control throughout the city is excellent. Each time we've annexed a new area, such as Palm Desert Country Club, we've worked hard to update the infrastructure so it matches the investments that were made in South Palm Desert and elsewhere. So having used our redevelopment funds in that way, we still have before us the challenge of getting utilities put underground. And we have two folks who are going to share with us today about methods for tackling that. And the first will be from city staff, Ryan Kaler, and he'll be joined a bit into what he has to share by Merrill E. Colton, one of our fellow residents who's been quite active around this topic. So Ryan, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Ryan Gaylor, project manager for the city of Palm Desert. And for this meeting, I want to go over a brief history of the undergrounding effort that's gone on in Palm Desert. Then take a look at some highlights of the utility undergrounding master plan that we completed back in 2018. And then lastly, I'll introduce a case study of a undergrounding project that is currently underway. So for history, since before the city of Palm Desert was incorporated, the residents of the area have been expressing concern about the safety, the aesthetics, and negative impacts to property values associated with the overhead lines that cross over houses. So shortly after the city was incorporated, new developments were required to install the utilities underground. But many of the lines that were installed prior to 1973 remain in service today. So in March of 2015, the City Council authorized the formation of the Utility Undergrounding Ad Hoc Committee, where they would study and try to improve the undergrounding process for residents. That committee was made up of citizens of Palm Desert primarily. The Ad Hoc Committee met together for over a year, and the result was the creation of the Utility Undergrounding Master Plan. The master plan, it's a roadmap that identifies areas within the city that have overhead utilities, and it tells how to implement programs to underground those utilities. So it's broken into two major categories. One is to help residents in residential areas to underground the poles, and then the second section is for general benefit areas. For residential neighborhoods, the most common way to accomplish utility underground is for homeowners to form an assessment district. On this slide here, you see a website address down at the bottom, www.cityofpalmdesert.org/undergrounding. If you want to go to that site, it will link you to the Utility Undergrounding Master Plan, along with the step-by-step guide that helps interested parties to learn how to form a district and how to underground the utilities. So as for general benefit, the undergrounding of overhead utilities that run along arterial streets or near scenic areas, those are considered to be of general benefit. And so in those areas, it can be funded by a public funding mechanism, but generally those funding mechanisms require a vote of the population, a 2/3 approval rate from the voters. So from where we are now, the next steps that the city has in our process of assisting with undergrounding, we're going to solicit the assistance of a consultant that'll help to make some progress in this goal of undergrounding utilities. The consultant will assist in locating potential districts, reaching out to the public and finding where there's interest and assisting these people form a district for undergrounding. The city in the past, we've completed 2 undergrounding projects successfully, and we're currently in the midst of a 3rd undergrounding district called the Tamarisk Utility Undergrounding District. In 2014, residents led by Marilee Colton formed this district, and Marilee is here to share some of the things she's learned in her experience with this undergrounding project. So I'll pass it on to Marilee.
Let's see, asked.
Here we go. I unmuted myself. I got involved with undergrounding here in Palm Desert because my neighbors next door had a pole in their backyard and the transformer exploded. And it was a hot, windy day, and there was a row of palm trees that are no longer there that caught fire, and there were palm fronds flying all over my neighborhood. The fire department said they were putting out spot fires 3 blocks away. So I thought, my goodness, somebody must be doing something about this. And I called the city, only to discover that, yes, some people are trying to start their own districts, but it's up to you. So I went door to door in my neighborhood and got signatures from neighbors who were interested in this, and specifically to have a study performed by a consultant to determine the cost and the how everything would work out. Where we are today, that was actually quite some time ago. One of the challenges here is that if you're walking door to door, really the only time to do it is January, February, and March. So it isn't like you really have all year to get your neighborhood involved. And so that's one challenge. And also during the time that this happened, that I was going door to door, some of the utilities changed. We used to have different telecoms, for example, and they're involved as well because their lines ride along with the same poles as Edison lines. So it's a combination of the neighbors, the city, and the utilities, which is Edison and the telecoms, all working together. There's a really good description of that on the website that Ryan mentioned to you. This is all new, however. When I was going door to door there, we were sort of starting from the ground up, and it was a lot of fun because I got to meet a lot of people, and I do keep them up to date with written reports periodically. One of the things that challenged us was that it took a long time to get Marrakesh HOA, which is adjacent to our project, to agree to give Edison an extra easement on their property. So it's complicated to underground utilities in an area that's already developed. It's very easy to underground utilities if you're building a new housing development. You do that first. When you do it second, when you do it last, it's different. One of the things I found was that a lot of folks, they're used to seeing the poles and wires in their backyard. They thought that's where the new service would go, and it doesn't. Edison doesn't do that anymore. The service will go in the street. And the purpose of undergrounding, according to the Public Utilities Commission, is there's three purposes: safety, reliability, and aesthetics, in that order. Safety was clearly demonstrated. The need for a safe electric transmission to our homes was demonstrated by the fire that was next door to me. And that could have happened in a high wind. It could have happened in an earthquake where lines come down. A lot of people have utility lines very close to their swimming pools. Reliability is similar to that in the sense that once the wires are underground, the most common thing that happens for above ground wires is wind, and there's no wind underground. So obviously you get better service more often. You have less chance of having power outages due to failure. And then aesthetics, of course, here we are with these gorgeous mountains around us, and they are really marred by the poles and wires. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, let me quickly explain that if you go to the reactions button and click on that, raise hand will be one of your choices. So you can do that, or if your face is visible, you can also try waving.
Okay, now I just have a question. So where are we now? I'm sorry I haven't gone online to see what's going on, but what is going on? Are we going to do it? Is the city coming up with money? Have they decided how much the residents are going to pay, or where does it stand right now?
Right now, Edison has taken approximately a year to acquire some easements from some of the neighbors. The reason for that is that approximately 20% of the houses in the Tamarack district had already undergrounded the wires that go from the pole to their house. Generally speaking, if you can afford to do that and it's important to you, people have done it because they go right over the pool sometimes.
Yeah, ours is that way. Yeah,
right.
Ours is
And
underground.
so some of the infrastructure that Edison needs to access is actually under that pole. So they're doing that right now. Supposedly next month, July, they're going to start issuing easements, and I expect to have a lot of questions from folks who are going to wonder why they're hearing from Edison. And we're committed, along with the city, to go and visit people and tell them what's going on that are affected by that. There will be maybe 10 of those parcels that will have a separate easement. After that, we're really near the end because the city has a consultant on board who will write the engineer's report, is what it's called, and that's going to detail everything, all the costs, where the costs are coming from, where the financing is coming from, and the allocation of the costs that the neighbors will bear allocated to each parcel. It's there's copies of those from the 2 undergrounding districts that the city's done already at the Silver Spur Ranch and the Highlands. And I strongly urge people to read those because while ours will look a little bit different and they modernize these things all the time, the basics are there to show you what's involved. And then that document is public record. There will be at least one required public meeting, but perhaps we'll have more. And then the parcel owners, they don't have to be US citizens. If you're a Canadian citizen and you own that property, you can vote. The parcel owners will vote up or down, yes or no. We agree with this assessment and we would like to assess ourselves to underground the utilities. And the utility undergrounding will proceed, the construction will proceed after that vote of 50% plus 1.
And if I can insert, the city did come up with substantial funding to enable the engineering study, because the engineering study is an essential prerequisite to find out what kind of costs we're asking the residents to accept with a vote. So that's our effort to support the process and at least get to the point where people can vote. Another question might percolate, but let's move to our second topic and we'll see how much time we have at the end. In recent months, we've heard from quite a few residents in South Palm Desert about specific traffic issues. And this is hugely helpful because we can't have officers or staff monitoring every intersection. We do have statistical ways of identifying where there are traffic problems that perhaps need to be addressed, but it's much preferable to hear from residents before we have statistics such as accidents. So we greatly appreciate the resident input and have extensive efforts underway to respond to traffic concerns both in South Palm Desert and elsewhere in the city. So Randy Bowman is going to share with us about some steps underway. Take it away, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to give an update on what we're doing to study Haystack Road for traffic calming and safety. Some of the slides should look familiar to those that were able to attend our first community meeting, but expecting that some folks weren't able to attend, I thought I'd give a quick overview of the project. So the city has engaged a consultant to study the roadway. The first thing, as the mayor said, is getting community input on concerns and possible solutions for speeding and safety in the corridor. The consultant is going to be looking at the traffic, motor vehicle, traffic patterns, and as the mayor said, statistics, as well as the input from the community. They're also going to be looking at the other modes of travel, the bicycle and pedestrians and safety, as well as operational issues. Options for improvement. The consultant is skilled and experienced in looking at roadways for traffic calming and accommodating bicycles and pedestrians. And they're going to be providing insights and suggestions from their experience for the community to consider. That's going to take the form of drafts that we're going to come to the community in upcoming meetings. So as I said, there has been one community meeting. It was held on May 4th. And I think we received a lot of good input from the folks that attended. And in fact, folks that weren't able to attend also provided feedback to us either through the website that we've created for the project, or I received emails directly or even phone calls from residents. And we encourage you to continue to provide insights and information that our consultant team needs to know about and include in their analysis as the project proceeds. There will be 2 more community meetings that we will gradually discuss potential improvements, settle on some practical applications, and get comments from the community. And if you haven't written it down, please do. Go visit www.haystackroad.com. That's our project website. We are providing information on the project. There's also opportunity for you to sign up for project updates and emails, and also give input on the project. So the timeline, again, first meeting was in May. The consultant right now is reviewing the data that they've collected on the roadway. They actually went out and conducted traffic counts in May before the season ended. And they are putting together a prospective toolbox of issues and solutions that we will go back to the community in July with the results of their analysis and some initial concepts. And then with the input that we received from the community in July, the consultant's going to go back, further modify, further evolve their thinking and recommendations, and then we'll come back to the community in September. So what do we know at this time? This is some of the initial data that we provided to the community at the May 4th meeting. We all know the configuration of the roadway. We've got bicycle lanes and parking lanes. The last count that was done, we counted about 4,700 vehicles per day on Haystack. Yes, the speed limit presently is posted 45. However, we have a large number of vehicles that have been noted, have been counted as traveling above the speed limit. And then, of course, an indicator of roadway safety is the number of collisions that have been reported by police. And as of May 4th, we had 9 vehicle collisions that had been reported over the last 11 years. So where are we today? The consultant, again, has counted vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles. They've conducted field observations and taken a lot of photos and video of the roadway. They are looking into some suggestions from the community about the visibility of existing signs on the roadway, as well as some concerns that were raised about corner site clearance. So can you see around the corner when you want to merge into the roadway or leave the roadway? Things like vegetation, for instance, might have overgrown and might interfere with the motorist's vision. So they're looking into that and applying standards, and they'll be reporting on their progress at the next meeting. The city also has acquired speed feedback signs. You probably have seen these types of signs at school zones where they indicate your actual speed. We are installing several signs like that along Haystack as a part of an early initiative to help remind motorists what is the current posted speed limit. And these signs gather data, so we will have ongoing information about how motorists are reacting to the speed feedback signs that will be installed. We received them, we're checking to make sure they weren't damaged in shipping, and then in the coming weeks, we'll be installing 6 signs along Haystack Road. Police, as the mayor said, enforcement is certainly part of how a community monitors and manages roadway safety. Police began a targeted enforcement on June 1st, and they have deployed police. They're deploying police at various times of the day, various days of the week to conduct speed enforcement. We are working with police that at the conclusion of this month, they're going to be reporting to us the number of citations, the demographics, if you will, of the citations, time of day, those things. And we're going to feed that information to the consultant, because that is good information for the consultants to have as they put together potential toolbox and potential solutions for Haystack Road. So that's where we are with the project status, and I have reached the end of my slides.
And Randy, were you going to say a word about how the city is addressing traffic issues apart from Haystack?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Our residents have contacted us about other traffic-related issues that they're aware of. And for instance, a resident expressed concern about the intersection of Mesa View Drive and Highway 74. And while that's not within the scope of the Haystack traffic calming study, we are aware of that concern, and we are assigning another consultant to look at the safety of that intersection. Is a traffic signal warranted, for instance? I think a lot of folks see folks that are coming down from the hill and are driving rather fast. So a separate traffic consultant is going to be looking at that. This same consultant is going to be looking at key intersections and roadway segments citywide between now and the end of the year, and advising the city on where we should be focusing our efforts to improve intersection safety, intersection capacity. For instance, if we have a lot of motorists that are queuing up and are stacking at intersections unnecessarily, there may be opportunities for us to tweak the traffic signal operations or add a turn lane or lengthen a turn lane to improve the flow of traffic and improve safety for all roadway users.
Could you stop sharing your screen?
Absolutely, ma'am.
The takeaway message there is that we do have steps underway to address traffic issues throughout the city. So whether you live in South Palm Desert or elsewhere, if you're aware of an issue, please reach out to the city and we'll get that issue to Randy so that it can be a part of our ongoing efforts. Any questions for Randy and staff about the Haystack study or any other traffic issues? I'm sure you've experienced, as I have, that things haven't quite slowed down yet this summer. Some of our folks are lingering, I think, to take advantage of the COVID restrictions being lifted and enjoy the desert before they go back to their summer homes. So we still have to share the streets with quite a few of our rainbirds, if not snowbirds. Before we move to our third topic, I'm going to go back to Ryan Kaler briefly because we did have a question from Roland Alden about how the draft assessment districts for possible undergrounding have been fashioned. So Ryan, can you share about that?
Sure. Yeah, the question is regarding in the master plan. It details 21 unique districts that range in size from less than 10 parcels to more than 100 parcels. And his question is, how do we expect these people to all come together? If you have such a large district, how do you expect them to all come together to create a district? And the answer is, these are suggested zones or districts, and for any resident that wants to get together with their neighbor and sort of create a district that they think is logical, we're willing to entertain that. It has to meet certain criteria. Southern California, Edison, they have to approve the district. Once it gets far enough down the road and creating the district, it's got to be approved by SCE. But like I said, these districts are just proposed districts, and if residents want to form a district of their own shape or size, we're more than willing to look at those and try to make it work.
Ryan, if we have 21 districts in the plan and that expands to a substantially larger number because of the process that you just described, then we have 20, 30, 40 of these projects. Marilee Colton described the Tamarisk project, which has been going on for years. The Tamarisk project is less than 3% of the entire master plan. So if we go back to the very first projects in Palm Desert, only 2 have been completed, and with Tamarisk that would make 3. That would be 12% of the entire city. It's going to be coming up on 25 years. And so the question I would have is whatever happened to economy of scale, dividing the plan up into smaller and smaller pieces where a legal assessment district has to be formed, engineering studies have to be performed, crews have to be scrambled to actually do the work. Each one of these is a massive construction project. The startup and teardown costs are significant. And I submitted a second question, which is essentially hardly any other city in California has actually done it this way. This is not how Rancho Mirage did their undergrounding. This is not how it's being done in Santa Barbara or San Diego. Why do we think this is a good idea?
I think it's important to realize that these underground projects are driven by residents and a desire of the residents to form these districts. And so part of when we bring a consultant on board, he's going to be attempting to locate sort of hot pockets of interest where residents can get together and form it. And of course, we want to get the biggest bang for our buck, and we want to create these economies of scale. But if we don't have the interest, we can't force people to be interested. And as for the other question, Mayor Kelly addressed that many of the cities that have performed this undergrounding have done it with redevelopment dollars. And as she indicated, we've used redevelopment dollars for other important priorities here in the city.
San Diego doesn't have redevelopment dollars. Santa Barbara doesn't have, no city in California has redevelopment dollars anymore.
Roland, understood. And as you know, undergrounding is extremely expensive. So there needs to be an appetite on the part of the public to authorize some source of funds. What I would share with you from the perspective of an elected person is that it has been our sense in most recent years that the appetite is not there on the part of 2/3 of the residents, which is what it would take to increase taxes through some means. But our minds are certainly not closed to that. So I hope you'll stay in the conversation because one of the reasons we're bringing this topic before everyone is to get some feedback as our new consultant gives us choices. So Ryan has your name, and as this progresses through more process at the city, we'll be reaching out to you to make sure you get a chance to weigh in. So thanks.
Thank you.
And our third topic, Alan, how are all those critters holding up in the heat?
Well, hi, Mayor Kelly. Well, the good news is all of our animals are adapted to desert climate, and so they're doing just fine. I, of course, worry much more about the staff who are working outside on days like today. And so we have a hydration program and a staff safety program in place to make sure that they all stay in good health. And I want to thank you for the opportunity today to give a little bit of a feedback and an update on what's happening at the zoo. But before I start, I wanted to thank the city for their support over the last year. You know, whether it's been a kind word or just a little bit of supportive suggestions and helping with some marketing information or also some permitting. You know, the city's been a big asset here in the last year. And so if you would share that with the city staffers, that it's certainly appreciated. So although we're more known for our animal collection here at the Living Desert Zoo, and we are the Living Desert Zoo and Gardens. And so we do have these wonderful garden spaces that showcase the wonderful diversity of desert plants. And sometimes they don't get as much of attention. So I thought I started today with some of these glamour shots from our garden spaces. And also to let you know that recently USA Today had a Reader's Choice poll. And one of the categories was the best botanical garden in the United States. And we came in as the top 10. We were actually number 7. So it's a great accolades for the people that recognize that the botanical collection that we have here is pretty spectacular. It doesn't always quite look this green and verdant, but it certainly can when the weather conditions are just right. And so I always encourage people to not just come and see our wonderful animals, but come out for an early morning hike through either our hiking trails or our formal gardens and enjoy the scenery that we have put together here for everybody. And one of the things that was kind of lost in this last year of the pandemic was our Australian Adventures habitat. And so, our mission is to talk about deserts from around the world. And so we have deserts represented from North America and Africa. And in this last year, we added Australian deserts to our mix of stories to tell and all the wonderful animals that are there. And the Australian Adventures was set to open up on March 21st of last year. And of course, we closed on March 17th due to the state's COVID precautions. So I had to explain to the wallabies why no one showed up for their grand opening festivities and to not take it personally. But over the last year, we've been able to have people come to see Australian Adventures and meet some of these wonderful Australian animals. This habitat is a little different in that the guests are walking inside the animal spaces. There are no barriers. And we ask the guests to stay on the pathway, but the animals are free to either hop or fly wherever they want to in the space. And so it really makes for a unique experience where guests can get literally just a few feet or even a few inches away from some of these animals and appreciate how wonderful that they are. We've also been blessed with some reproduction that's already been happening there. These are the yellow-footed rock wallabies. And we have had 3 joeys that have been born in the last year. As marsupials, they have a very interesting reproductive strategy, the outcome of which is these animals that grow inside the mom's pouch. And when they reach a certain stage of development, they'll start sticking a nose or an ear or a foot or a leg out. And then once they get comfortable, they'll start coming out more and more. And then, of course, as soon as anything strange comes around, they go hop right back in the pouch because that's the safest place that you can be. So our guests have had a chance to see this wonderful nature in place. We are working on building the zoo of the future. We've been around for, last year was our 50th anniversary. We were founded in 1970. So we're trying to plan what does the next 50 years of development look like. And so we are charging forward, as we like to say, building the zoo of the future. 2 years ago, we started with the construction of our new entry complex that allows guests to come into the park in a much more expeditious fashion. No more are there long waits all the way around the parking lot to get your tickets and come in. You can buy them online. We actually encourage online reservations. You just show your phone, get scanned, and you walk right on in. Since in the last little bit, we've been working on what we call phase 2, which is our Rhino Savanna habitat. This has been a construction progress for the last year or so. And so we had this little time-lapse photography we took of about an hour of effort that's going on out there right now. It is a beehive of activity as we are putting in place all of the infrastructure to service not only the rhinos and what they will need, but also the guests that will be enjoying this new facility. And so lots of people like to come and look through the cracks in the construction fence. Little kids like to see all the big yellow equipment, all the Tonka trucks and things like that that are grooming and manufacturing this new space for the rhinoceros. And this is what it looked like about a year ago. It was basically an empty area of our park. It was hidden from view by the guests by some berms along our walkways. So most people didn't realize that there was this space back there. And we used it for parking cars on busy days and things like that, but it did not have much of a regular use. So we're glad we had this space available to repurpose. This is sort of an architectural aerial perspective of the new habitat. Our parking lot is on the bottom end of this screen. and Portola runs from left to right in this orientation. And so this is a 4-acre habitat that we are adding in all the additional animal care facilities and then the new guest. And similar to the Australian Adventures, the guest pathway will go down through the middle of the rhino's habitat. So the rhinos can be on both sides of this space, and the guests will have their leisurely pathway going down through the middle. So they will be literally inside the rhino's habitat. We'll have some safety barriers to keep the rhinos where they need to be and the guests where they need to be. But it should be a great way to see and appreciate all these amazing animals. This is an aerial photograph from just a few weeks ago that shows all the transformations that are taking place. All this infrastructure you see going down the middle is the pedestrian pathways and the features that will be built into this to accommodate all of our guests to make sure they have a wonderful experience. In the next few months, we'll be finishing up all the artificial rock work that goes in here, and then doing all the landscaping, both the trees, the shrubs, and the grasses that will be brought in here to transform this currently dusty, sandy spot into a green, verdant African savanna. Lots of construction going on. We're hiring lots of local contractors that are doing the irrigation, the electrical, the rock works that are going on in there. This gives you a little idea of the size and scope. Those individuals there are some of the contractors that are standing in the public pathways. And so this will be a really large and tremendous opportunity for offering a new experience for our guests here in the park. You might wonder, where do we get animals to fill this new habitat? So this is adding 12 new species to our collection that we have here. So these are 12 new stories of animals that call deserts of Africa home. And we get all these animals from other zoos in North America. We never take animals from the wild anymore, except under very unusual circumstances. And so we notified the zoo community that we were opening up this new facility several years ago, and they have built into their breeding programs to provide us surplus animals. And so it's quite the maze of logistics to get those animals here. There's actually a relatively narrow window of temperature that we're able to ship animals across the country. And you know, that is basically when it's warm enough in other parts of the world, but not so hot here, and that we're exceeding the temperature requirements to transport these animals. So it's really just during the spring and the fall that are the ideal times to add animals to our collection. And so over the last 6 to 9 months, we have been slowly but surely acquiring these new animals to the point where right now, except for the rhinos and the mongoose, all of these animals are currently here on our grounds in holding spaces and scattered around the park, waiting for their opportunity to move into their new digs. The two signature animals for this collection are going to be our African black rhinos. This is our female rhino. Her name is Naya, which means purpose in Swahili. She's coming from the Potter Park Zoo in Lansing, Michigan, and she is about 3 years old. And so we're excited that we're going to be able to add her to our stories here. This showcases one of the unique features of black rhinos that can identify them from white rhinos, is that black rhinos have these prehensile, almost parrot-like lips that are very adept at plucking off individual leaves and branches. Black rhinos feed on trees and shrubs. They do not feed on grasses on the ground. And so they use those lips to pull things off and move them on down to be chewed and digested. And she'll be joined by Jolly. The male rhino is coming from the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. Jolly, his name means powerful in Swahili, but it also is kind of appropriate name. He was born on Christmas Eve, December 24th. So he is a jolly rhino any way you look at it. And so we'll be adding those animals to our collection that let us tell the conservation stories. You know, black rhinos are critically endangered in the wild. There are only about 5,500 of them left in the entire world. And so our effort is to establish a breeding program here for black rhinos so we can build up the insurance population of rhinos under human care and help to ensure that they do not go extinct, and that when the time comes and there's landscapes available in Africa to reintroduce them back into the wild, there are genetically healthy and strong animals that can serve that function. So the Rhino Savanna will have its grand opening the second week in November. We don't have the exact date of the grand opening yet. I still have to coordinate that with the completion of construction and all those last minute details. But the city will certainly get some invitations to come to our preview events, and we'll be putting out communications for the Coachella Valley in general to let them know when they can come and get their first sightings of all the wonderful new animals we'll be adding here to the living desert. So I want to thank everybody for the chance to share more of our stories. And I guess I could take a few questions if we have time for that, Kathleen.
Absolutely. Well, we're waiting for others to form their questions. Alan, could you remind us what time in the summer the Living Desert opens for members to get in their morning walk?
Yes, we are in our summer seasonal hours, which we open up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so it's still, even on a day like today, it was only in the upper 80s at 7 o'clock. So it's still worth your time to come in, get a little exercise, walk through your gardens, say hi to your favorite animals before the heat drives you back to the air conditioning on the inside. And then the park then closes. The last ticket is at 1 o'clock, and the park closes, the grounds close at 1:30. And that will continue through till in the beginning of October 1st.
I strongly urge folks to think about a membership with that great perk because it will set up your day much better than checking the news. Alan, I saw parakeets on the slide about the Australian exhibit. Are parakeets Aussies?
They are. We're familiar with parakeets as those, pet animals that many of us had as kids growing up. I had a parakeet named Cherry Pie when I was a young lad. But those are in fact native to Australia. And in our habitat, they are a free flight flock. And there are, 30 or 40 of them in there. You hear them chirping quite loudly, but they're hard to see sometimes because they are hiding up in the trees. They're green color. It's a pretty good camouflage, but it is unique in that these animals are trained for our care of them. And so several times a day they are fed, and there's a little dinner bell that rings, and that's the signal to the parakeets that it's time to come out of the trees, and they will flock down to one of the animal care staff and land on their hands and their necks and their heads as they struggle to get to the first of the seeds and the treats that we offer them. And so it's wonderful to be able to see a flock of parakeets flying around in that habitat.
Great. And I read that quite a few zoos have experienced a birth boom during the COVID pandemic, I guess, because fewer visitors had that consequence. Has that been true at all at the Living Desert?
Only to a little bit. Unlike in the old days when zoos kind of bred animals willy-nilly, so you could have, little cute ones around the Easter spring break time, which help drive attendance. In a modern day zoo, our animals are only bred when there's a particular need that we know there's going to be a space for them to go to, and there's a genetic reason that a particular male or female's genes are underrepresented. And that's when we try and put them together and have the magic of offspring develop. So in our case, the focus this summer has been in Australia. And so we had the yellow-footed rock wallabies. We also had some of our Chacoan peccaries, these little cute South American pig-like animals that were wonderful to see. They're so cute when they're young, not so much as they get older.
I know probably about 18 months ago, the African dog pups were quite the draw at the Living Desert. Now, have any of those moved to other zoos, or are they all maturing here locally?
They are still all here. We have at the moment 19 African wild dogs, which is our breeding pair and then 2 subsequent litters. It's one of the things that's been a little bit challenging due to COVID is that the flow of animals back and forth between zoos, we all share them for the common good of the individual species, is that transfer of animals back and forth has really slowed down. Many zoos have been closed over the last year. They've had to lay off staff, and they've not really had the resources to accommodate the shipments that would normally take place. So we're a little bit behind the ball on finding new homes for our African wild dogs, but that will pick up now here as many states are getting back to being in the reopening situation, and many other zoos around the country are reopening for their busy summer season in the last month or so.
Great. Any other questions?
See, somebody asked about Jolly and his age. Jolly was born in December 24th of 2018, and so he'll be coming up on 3 years of age when he gets here. So he's still a young male. Male African black rhinos don't become mature until 5 to 7 years of age, and so it'll be several years until we're going to be blessed to have little bouncing baby rhinos here.
Great. Ann Hart has a question.
Oh, yes, thank you. I asked about Jolly, but I also wondered about water management and how is it to provide all those waterworks and keep everybody cooled down and hydrated, everybody meaning the animals as well as the people during the summer?
Yes. Well, as I said, all of our animals are from desert habitats, so they're adapted to desert climates, but we still make accommodations for them. They're not quite ready for 120 degrees and things like that. So we provide both misters and fans for those hot summer season. And in some instances, swamp coolers are located behind the scenes to blow a little draft of cool air across the habitat. And so many times you see one of our animals lying down in a particular spot and you're wondering why are they lying there? It's because they've picked the spot that's the coolest. They got watered in the morning, so the ground is still cool. And there could be a swamp cooler in the background that's blowing a cool draft across that particular area.
Great. Well, we've just about run out of time. I do want to thank you, Alan, for the great work you and the board and your staff do, providing us with such a tremendous community asset. And for everyone else on the call, if you have follow-up questions, those of us at the city are available anytime, and Mara Lee has graciously made herself available to anyone who might want to learn from her experience. So thank you so much for being part of this town hall, and watch your bright side for information about coming attractions.